Ronaldinho is stepping up to defend Lionel Messi and the Argentina national team, personally begging the president of FIFA to overturn their shocking ban from the 2030 World Cup. You heard that right, the legendary soccer icon Ronaldinho himself, a beloved Barcelona idol and close personal friend of Gianni Infantino, actually marched into FIFA headquarters in Zurich to plead with them not to punish Argentina, desperately begging them not to bar this team from the upcoming tournament after they sparked what many are calling the most embarrassing scandals ever seen in a World Cup final. We are going to break down every single detail here, including shocking facts that no media outlet has reported yet, like the exact words Ronaldinho used to stand up for Messi, and the two massive rule violations that the FIFA disciplinary committee proved against Argentina using undeniable evidence, plus the millions of euros in heavy fines and harsh sanctions currently on the table, and most importantly, what the FIFA president actually decided to do after sitting down with Ronaldinho face to face. Believe it. This final decision is going to leave you absolutely stunned because it changes everything we know about international soccer. But first, let me ask you one quick thing. Stay with me until the very end, because what went down in that office in Zurich is far wilder than anyone could have possibly imagined. Let us take a step back and revisit exactly what happened during the 2026 World Cup. Some people want to forget it, they want to sweep it under the rug, but we are not moving on until the absolute truth is completely out in the open. Argentina entered that tournament carrying the massive weight of defending champions, with Lionel Messi leading them as their captain, bringing a squad that was fully expected to just play beautiful soccer, compete with clean sportsmanship, and showcase the very best aspects of the beautiful game we all love. Think about that for a second, the absolute best of the game, because what they actually did on the pitch was the exact opposite. It was easily the absolute worst display of behavior witnessed on a soccer pitch in recent decades. Worst of all, this was not just some minor isolated incident. It was not a player losing his temper or a red card for a bad tackle. It was two massive serious violations, calculated actions that were fully documented and proven by the FIFA disciplinary committee through clear video evidence, official testimonies, and match reports. These two violations go way beyond the sport of soccer, crossing straight into controversial politics, severe violence, and a complete utter lack of respect for the game itself, and everything that the World Cup represents. I am going to break down both of these massive issues one by one with complete detail, so that when we reach the end and I ask for your honest take, you have all the facts to decide if Argentina actually deserves to play in the 2030 World Cup, or if, on the contrary, this squad should be banned from stepping onto an official pitch for a very, very long time. Let us start with the first violation, the 2026 World Cup semifinal, Argentina versus England. A legendary match, I must admit. 90 minutes of pure, intense drama in a stadium that was absolutely rocking. Argentina won 2-1, a completely fair victory on the pitch. Up to that point, nothing was wrong. But what happened right after is what lit the fuse for this massive scandal. The very second the referee blew the final whistle, a group of Argentine players, with Lionel Messi right in the middle of them, unrolled a massive banner at the center circle of the pitch, displaying a highly controversial political statement that has absolutely nothing to do with soccer. The Falklands are Argentine, written there in giant letters, right in front of the global broadcast cameras and millions of stunned viewers, in a global tournament that is strictly meant to be neutral ground where sports bring nations together. Instead, they turned it into an outright act of geopolitical provocation. Now, please let me be very clear about this. I am definitely not here to argue about territorial sovereignty or who is actually right in the Falklands conflict. That is a complicated geopolitical issue that does not belong to me, and it definitely does not belong on a soccer field. What I can tell you with absolute certainty is that you simply cannot do something like that at a World Cup. It is strictly and explicitly banned under official FIFA regulations. Article 4 of the Disciplinary Code lays it out in plain English. Any kind of political rally, religious demonstration, or non-sporting message of any nature is strictly prohibited on the field during official competitive matches. This crucial rule exists specifically to stop the beautiful game from turning into an ideological war zone, and yet Argentina completely ignored it with clear, deliberate intent because that banner was not made by a random spectator in the crowd. The players themselves were the ones carrying it. They had it ready, knew exactly what they were doing, and pulled it off in front of the entire world. Now here is the most painful part of this entire story, the exact detail that pushed the FIFA disciplinary committee to hand down an individual suspension to Lionel Messi as well, because he was definitely not just watching this unfold from a safe distance. Messi did not step away from his teammates, claiming he had absolutely nothing to do with it. No, the footage is undeniable, and the committee reviewed it frame by frame. Messi was standing right in the middle of the group, holding one corner of that banner with his very own hand. The captain, the leader, there he is, the icon of Argentine soccer, standing right in the center circle of a World Cup semifinal, smiling while holding up a completely banned political sign. Look, here is the thing. Lionel Messi might very well be the greatest soccer player of all time in the eyes of millions. He might have a heart of gold, just like Ronaldinho always says, and he could be a truly wonderful human being off the pitch. But this whole controversy has nothing to do with whether Messi is a good guy or a bad guy. It is about the fact that as captain and leader of that squad, you have a strict duty to keep order and say, "Listen, guys, we are not bringing this banner out." You have an absolute obligation to be the first person who thinks with their brain instead of their emotions. And he just did not do that. That is exactly why FIFA singled him out, and why this personal punishment against Messi, which has completely outraged half the planet, has a solid foundation. You simply cannot deny the logic behind it, no matter how much you adore the player. But hold on, because everything I just laid out is merely the first violation. The second one is infinitely worse. What I am about to tell you now is what actually triggered the biggest fallout. It drove the FIFA disciplinary committee to hand down the most extreme and severe punishment ever seen against a national team in the entire history of modern soccer. And I must warn you, what comes next is incredibly heavy. The 2026 World Cup final, Argentina versus Spain, the biggest match on the planet. Billions of passionate fans tuned in to watch the action unfold from every single corner of the globe. The Spanish national team had played an absolutely spectacular tournament up to then. They showcased some of the most beautiful, elite-level soccer you could imagine, completely earning their hard-fought right to compete in this massive final. Standing right across from them was Argentina, the defending world champions on paper, setting up a legendary matchup for the history books. But in reality, it turned into an absolute nightmare. I mean, a total nightmare, because what Argentina did on that pitch had absolutely nothing to do with playing soccer. A massive deep investigation by the FIFA disciplinary committee analyzed every single play frame by frame. Combining detailed reports from the four match officials and the video assistant referee, they categorically concluded that the Argentine squad stepped onto that pitch with a premeditated plan of systematic anti-football. They did not even compete. They did not even try to win using the ball. They came to destroy, to provoke, and to stop Spain from playing their game by any means necessary. They walked into the biggest game on earth solely to ruin the spectacle. Right from the opening whistle, the Argentine players unleashed an absolutely brutal pattern of tactical fouls. These were not your average, everyday tactical fouls that you normally see in a standard match. They were late, vicious challenges from behind with a clear, undeniable intent to cause physical harm. We are talking knee-high studs, elbows thrown during aerial battles, and ankles stomped long after the ball was gone. The footage gathered by the committee is truly bone-chilling. Every time Spain tried to play and pass the ball, they tried to build up an attack. The Argentines responded with pure, unadulterated violence disguised as high intensity. Do not even try to defend it, because the raw numbers do not lie. Argentina committed 26 fouls during that final. 26. The official disciplinary committee determined that at least 14 of those fouls were classified as excessively intense, with a clear, obvious risk of injury. 14 potentially career-ending fouls in a single World Cup final. Do you understand what that actually means? It means that every 6 minutes, a Spanish player took a hit that easily could have broken a bone. Every 6 minutes in the biggest game on earth. That is simply not soccer. That is an active manhunt on the pitch. I have spent my entire life watching and living soccer, and I can tell you that I have absolutely never seen anything like this at this level. Not even during the most brutal tournaments of the 1980s or 90s did we ever witness such a blatant level of dirty play. It was calculated, shameless, and disgusting. Yet, through all the vicious hits, constant provocations, and cheap shots, Spain held strong. They did more than just survive, they won it, 1-0. It was a goal that was worth its weight in gold. It meant more than any other goal scored in the modern era of the sport, because it was built on pure talent, beautiful passing, and actual soccer. They did it against 11 opponents who only cared about destruction. Spain lifted the trophy by playing beautiful soccer, while Argentina tried to turn the pitch into a bloody riot. And that, honestly, should have been more than enough for the entire sports world to permanently condemn Argentina's tactics. But the absolute worst part of this entire scandal was still to come. Because what went down right after the final whistle blew is what triggered the ultimate historic earthquake. Listen closely to this. The referee blew his whistle to end the game. Spain won, Argentina 0. Spain were officially the champions of the world, and their players immediately began to celebrate. It was the natural reaction of any group of athletes who had just captured the single biggest trophy in existence. Tears, massive hugs, overwhelming joy, the rawest emotions of sports. But right in that moment of victory, while the Spaniards celebrated, several Argentine players completely lost their minds. They refused to accept defeat. They simply could not handle the bitter taste of losing, and their immediate response was to physically attack the celebrating Spanish team. Violent shoves, wild punches. One Argentine player went as far as to brutally kick a Spanish rival in the back while he was celebrating with his teammates. Another player slammed an elbow right into the face of an opponent who was literally just hugging his coach. Those shocking images immediately went viral all over the globe. Phone videos shot from every single angle imaginable, showing players in the famous blue and white jerseys, relentlessly attacking Spanish players who were completely innocent, guys who were just trying to celebrate the absolute happiest moment of their entire lives. And speaking as a massive soccer fan, someone who deeply loves this game, I felt an overwhelming sense of second-hand embarrassment that is hard to put into words. Look, we all get losing. We understand being heartbroken, frustrated, and completely crushed. But turning around and throwing punches at the team that just beat you fair and square? That is a whole different story. Honestly, there are no words for it. Well, actually, there are. Pure cowardice. Complete lack of sportsmanship, raw violence, and all of this happening on the grandest stage of a World Cup final, broadcast to billions of viewers globally. The entire reputation of soccer was deeply stained that night, and the guilty parties are wearing the blue and white jerseys of Argentina. But now we get to the burning question that absolutely everyone was asking. What was FIFA actually going to do about this? Would they just look the other way, slap them with a tiny, meaningless fine, and move on? Let us be completely honest here. Most of us assumed FIFA would just pull their usual routine. They would issue a nice, polished press release, hand out a slap on the wrist, and sweep it under the rug. But not this time. Let me tell you why. It is because the FIFA Disciplinary Committee immediately launched a massive formal investigation that dragged on for several intense weeks. We are talking about weeks of analyzing every single frame of video, interviewing referees, and questioning match officials, talking to security personnel, and speaking with players from both national teams. Weeks of gathering solid evidence and dissecting every ugly incident from both the final and that heated semifinal clash against England. And once they finally wrapped up that deep dive, the final conclusion was absolutely devastating. Truly devastating. The official report from the Disciplinary Committee, which insiders close to FIFA claim runs over 200 pages, laid out two massive primary charges against the Argentine Football Association. Charge number 1, displaying banned political messages during an official tournament, which was a direct reference to that controversial Falkland Islands banner they held up after the semi-final against England. That is a violation that directly breaks Article 4 of the Disciplinary Code, an offense that on its own already triggers incredibly harsh penalties. And then we have charge number 2, the big one, the heavy blow that changed everything. Premeditated collective violent conduct and physical assault targeting opposing players during the actual World Cup final itself. This second accusation is of an unprecedentedly serious nature. The committee concluded that those post-match assaults were not just isolated, spontaneous flare-ups, but rather a coordinated team reaction that proved there was a complete breakdown of discipline within the Argentine squad and their coaching staff. Meaning, This was not just one hot-headed player losing his temper, it was multiple players, and absolutely nobody stepped in to stop them. Not the captain, not the manager, and not the staff. Backed by those two heavy charges, the FIFA disciplinary board handed down the absolute harshest punishment we have ever seen, leveled against a major national football team. Let this sink in. A complete ban of the Argentine national team from the 2030 World Cup. Argentina is officially locked out of the next tournament. They cannot even play in the qualifying stages. They are barred from contesting a single official match in the qualifiers for the upcoming tournament hosted by Spain, Portugal, and Morocco. Done. Completely out. And it gets worse. They slapped a massive €30 million fine on the Argentine Football Association. That is €30 million. That sum might sound enormous at first glance, but honestly, I think it is incredibly soft considering the sheer scale of what they did. Imagine paying €30 million for completely dragging the global reputation of soccer through the mud, for physically assaulting opponents in a World Cup final, and for using the game as a political stage. €30 million? Do you even know what a single elite player earns in a single year? Way more than that. And yet we are talking about an entire national squad that permanently stained the single most prestigious tournament on the planet. Personally, they should have hit them with a €100 million fine and forced them to scramble to figure out how to pay it off, because €30 million is practically pocket change given the massive revenues the Argentine Association pulls in. But the hammer did not stop falling there. The disciplinary committee went further by handing down heavy individual punishments as well. 3 key Argentine players, who were identified as the main instigators in those ugly post-game clashes, received lengthy bans of between 2 and 4 years from all international competitions. 2 to 4 years. That means those specific players are completely barred from representing Argentina in any official matches for that entire duration. And then we have the ruling that triggered the most intense debate across the globe. The personal suspension handed to Lionel Messi, a 6-month ban from participating in any international competition with his national team. Now this was not for physically fighting, as the committee explicitly acknowledged that Messi did not lay a finger on anyone, but rather for his active role in displaying that forbidden political banner during the semifinal match, and for failing as team captain to step up and use his leadership to stop both the banner incident and the chaotic violence that erupted afterward. FIFA argued that as national team captain, you carry a heavy burden on your shoulders, and Messi completely failed that duty. And right here, friends, is where the real controversy begins to heat up. Because what went down after these massive penalties went public shook the entire global soccer community like a massive earthquake. Outrage erupted worldwide. The Argentine Soccer Association vowed to appeal, while top politicians called for a total boycott of FIFA itself. Desperate fans filled Buenos Aires streets protesting the harsh decision. Meanwhile, European federations cheered the move. The Spanish Federation even put out an official statement backing the ban, thanking FIFA for protecting their squad from violence. To be honest, that official statement felt way too soft. I fully expected the Spanish Federation to be much more aggressive, demanding far heavier suspensions for the players. But at the very least, they finally acknowledged that the behavior was completely unacceptable. Right in the eye of this raging storm, through all the political and sporting chaos, Ronaldinho suddenly steps in. Ronaldinho Gaucho, the true smile of soccer. The Brazilian legend who captured our hearts with his pure magic does something that absolutely no one saw coming next. He boards a private flight straight to Zurich, marches right inside the FIFA headquarters, and demands an urgent personal meeting with President Gianni Infantino. Now, here is something most fans miss. Ronaldinho and Gianni Infantino share a deep bond going back years. They know each other well, having met at endless galas and charity events. Ronaldinho serves as a high-profile ambassador for several FIFA initiatives, and that unique bond is exactly what opened the door to the executive office. At a moment when probably nobody else in the sport could get an audience, Gianni Infantino welcomed him in. Think about it. We are talking about a ruling from the Independent Disciplinary Committee. This is a separate judicial body. It is not a ruling the president can just wipe away with a simple snap of his fingers. There are strict procedures, protocols, and a legal framework. But Ronaldinho arrives in Zurich and demands a face-to-face meeting about Argentina and Messi, and they actually let him right inside. That alone tells you everything about the massive influence Ronaldinho still commands in this sport. This is a guy who has been retired for years, holds no official title, and does not represent any federation, yet he still has the power to sit across from the most powerful man in world soccer and make him listen. So what did Ronaldinho actually tell Gianni Infantino? This is the most eye-opening part of the entire saga. According to direct leaks that came from inside the soccer governing body itself, Ronaldinho laid out three major arguments to defend his old friend. First, he argued that the post-match chaos was simply part of the game. Just part of the game, a moment where emotions ran high and tension boiled over. In a World Cup final, adrenaline is pumping and players make mistakes. He admitted they reacted poorly, but insisted it was never a pre-planned attack. It was not a calculated plot to cause harm, just a sudden emotional outburst, a split second of collective madness after suffering the most heartbreaking defeat of their entire lives. Now, with all due respect in the world to Ronaldinho, a player I absolutely love, I have to tell you that this excuse simply does not hold up. It falls apart because the official investigation proved their dirty play during the match was highly systematic. 26 fouls, 14 of extreme intensity. That is not a last-minute flare-up. That is a deliberate strategy. And the physical assaults after the final whistle were definitely not part of the game. Kicking a celebrating opponent is not part of the game. It is straight-up violence. It is honestly shocking that a legend with Ronaldinho's reputation would try to downplay such aggressive behavior. I am sorry, Ronaldinho, but you are totally wrong. His second argument was about Messi. And in this particular area, I must admit the situation becomes a bit more complicated. Ronaldinho reportedly told Infantino some very specific words. Messi has an enormous heart, completely free of any malice whatsoever, always looking to support his teammates. Punishing him is an absolute joke. He went on to stress that Messi never got involved in any physical fights, that he did not push anyone, strike anyone, or throw insults at anyone once the match ended, and that holding up the offensive banner was a collective team action he got swept into, making it totally unfair to punish him alone as if he engineered the whole thing. Now look closely, because this is precisely where the argument gets incredibly fascinating, because one side of me completely gets where Ronaldinho is coming from. Messi did not attack anyone during that final. That is a proven fact. But another side of me, the fan who watched Argentine players aggressively kick the Spanish squad during their celebration, screams out, "Buddy, you were the team captain, so where on earth were you? Why did you not stop your own teammates? Why did you not step right into the middle of it and say, 'Stop, this is wrong'?" A captain does far more than just slide on an armband. A captain is supposed to restore order when things spiral completely out of control. And Messi did not do that. Back in the semifinal, he did not just fail to stop the banner display, he actively held it with his own hands. Look, anyone can draw their own conclusions. But being a nice guy does not mean you get a pass on the heavy responsibilities of leading a team as captain. Now, the third argument from Ronaldinho was easily the most sensible of the three. It was all about proportionality. He told Infantino that banning an entire national team from the next World Cup was a completely excessive and unfair punishment. He pointed out previous tournaments where serious clashes, massive brawls, and red cards occurred. Despite major provocations, FIFA had never gone to the absolute extreme of banning an entire country from the next tournament. Sure, financial fines and individual player suspensions made total sense. But stripping an entire nation of its dream, and denying millions of passionate Argentine fans the chance to watch their team play in the World Cup, is a punishment that goes way too far. Personally, I have to admit that Ronaldinho has a point here. Yes, this punishment is completely unprecedented and incredibly harsh, but we must also admit that what happened during that 2026 World Cup final has no parallel in history. Never before had we seen players from a national team launch physical assaults on their opponents in a World Cup final right after the final whistle blew. Never. It was a whole new level of sports shame. And an unprecedented level of shame demands an unprecedented level of punishment. It is that simple. So is this penalty actually too harsh? Maybe. But what the Argentine players did was also completely over the line, incredibly over the line. According to inside sources, Ronaldinho met behind closed doors with Infantino for over an hour, more than 60 intense minutes inside that office. This clearly proves the conversation was deep and filled with heavy debate. Not just a quick 5-minute chat before heading out the door. After leaving the meeting, Ronaldinho did not make any immediate statements to the public. He slipped out of the building without saying a single word to the reporters waiting at the door, quickly sliding into a car and driving off. For someone as famously social and outgoing as Ronaldinho, that silent exit is incredibly revealing. If he had walked out of there happy, if he had gotten what he came for, he probably would have emerged smiling, giving a quick thumbs up, maybe saying something positive, but instead we got absolute silence, and that silence fueled intense media speculation for days. Did that high-profile visit actually accomplish anything? Did Ronaldinho manage to soften Infantino's stance? Was FIFA really about to walk back its decision? Argentine media outlets immediately published highly optimistic headlines, calling Ronaldinho the ultimate guardian angel of the Albiceleste. Meanwhile, European outlets remained deeply skeptical, insisting FIFA would never bend to pressure. Over in Spain, major sports media platforms took a very clear stance. Across Marca, AS, El Chiringuito, and Cope, the consensus was absolutely identical. If FIFA reduces this punishment just because a retired player visited, no matter how legendary he is, they will completely destroy their own credibility. After all, what kind of message does that send? That if you have a famous friend, you can escape punishment for attacking your rivals in a World Cup final? That would be an absolute joke. And now, we finally arrive at the exact moment you have been waiting for. This is what the FIFA president decided in the tense days following his long meeting with Ronaldinho. Everything that was quietly decided in the days following that intense hour-long meeting. The ultimate definitive answer that Gianni Infantino delivered to the entire world, to Argentina, to Messi, and to Ronaldinho himself. Please pay very close attention here, because this situation is far more complex than it looks, and its consequences are still being felt today. Gianni Infantino called an extraordinary press conference, which is something he almost never does just for disciplinary matters. Normally, FIFA just issues a simple press release and moves on. But the massive scale of this scandal and intense media pressure, along with Ronaldinho's visit and the massive global outrage, forced the president to step up and address the public directly. Here is exactly what he said. I will break down the core points, because it is absolutely essential to understand every single detail. Point number 1, the total ban of the Argentine national team from the 2030 World Cup stands completely. Infantino made it very clear, in statements widely reported by the media, that the disciplinary committee followed the rule book exactly. He emphasized that their investigation was incredibly thorough, the evidence is absolutely undeniable, and the final decision to keep Argentina out of the 2030 World Cup is locked in. There is zero option to appeal this ruling directly to the committee. Sure, Argentina can still take their case to the Court of Arbitration for Sport in Lausanne, but FIFA made it absolutely clear they are ready to defend their position to the absolute limit. Argentina is out of the World Cup, and honestly, thank goodness for that. Thank goodness Infantino actually had the backbone to stand his ground and not back down, because if they had actually lifted the suspension just because Ronaldinho visited, the message would have been absolutely devastating. It would have signaled that the rules do not matter and that personal connections rank way above actual sporting justice. That means you can literally assault opponents in a World Cup final and get away free just because some famous superstar steps in to plead your case. And that, my friends, would have totally destroyed what little credibility FIFA has left. We all know FIFA is not exactly a shining beacon of transparency, but on this specific call, I honestly think they got it completely right. Point 2, and here is the wild twist that absolutely nobody expected. Gianni Infantino announced that after carefully considering the arguments presented, he explicitly highlighted the personal intervention of Ronaldinho. Without naming him directly, he spoke of influential soccer figures expressing their opinions, prompting FIFA to modify the individual punishment of Lionel Messi. That heavy 6-month ban from international competition, which hung heavily over Lionel Messi, has been reduced to a symbolic formal warning and a personal fine of €5 million. €5 million. In other words, Lionel Messi is no longer suspended. Messi is no longer banned from playing for Argentina, but Argentina is still banned from the 2030 World Cup. Do you get it? The superstar is free on an individual level. But since Argentina is kicked out of the World Cup, he cannot play in the tournament with his national team anyway. It is a completely empty freedom, a purely symbolic gesture that in reality changes absolutely nothing for him. And as for that €5 million fine slapped on Lionel Messi personally, €5 million for a superstar who has made hundreds of millions over his career is basically like handing a minor parking ticket to a literal billionaire. It does not hurt him or affect him. €5 million is pocket change to Messi. Did Ronaldinho actually win and get what he wanted? Well, yes and no. He managed to get Lionel Messi's formal suspension completely lifted, yes, but he failed at the main goal of getting Argentina back in the World Cup. It makes you wonder what Ronaldinho is thinking right now. Does he feel satisfied with this result, or does he feel he flew to Zurich for nothing? Because the big punishment, the real one, the one that completely breaks the heart of Argentine soccer, remains completely intact and entirely unmovable. And point 3, the final detail in Gianni Infantino's decision that many people have completely overlooked, but is actually incredibly important. FIFA left the door open, just a tiny crack but open for the future. Infantino stated that if the Argentine Football Association issues a formal public apology, pays the entire €30 million fine in full, and proves they have implemented incredibly strong internal disciplinary measures, including permanently banning all the attacking players from any future national team call-ups, then FIFA might, just might, reconsider letting Argentina participate in tournaments after the 2030 World Cup. In other words, Argentina could potentially return for the 2034 World Cup if they meet every condition, but they are completely out for 2030. There is no turning back. Now here is my personal opinion on this door Gianni Infantino left open, and do not try to tell me otherwise. That door is an absolute trap. It is just bait to force Argentina to apologize publicly. It allows FIFA to look incredibly generous in the photo ops, playing the role of the merciful savior while keeping the general public perfectly happy with a cheap show. But the brutal reality is that Argentina is completely out of the 2030 World Cup, and that is irreversible. All those players who are currently in their absolute prime, who spent years dreaming of playing a World Cup in Spain, Portugal, and Morocco, those players will never get that chance. Their window has closed forever, and no apology, no matter how sincere, can ever give them back the games they missed. And do you know what actually shocks me the most about this entire situation? What really stands out is the defensive reaction coming straight out of Argentina. Instead of accepting the blame and admitting they messed up and must now face the harsh consequences of their actions, all we have witnessed coming out of Buenos Aires is just pure, unadulterated victimhood. They are releasing statements claiming FIFA is persecuting them, alleging a European conspiracy against South American soccer, and crying that they are punished simply for being Argentine. And that, my friends, that is actually more outrageous to me than the physical assaults themselves. It is one thing to lose your temper during a high-stakes match, which is already incredibly bad, but it is completely different when you lack the basic decency to admit you were wrong, to admit they attacked their opponents, period. No excuses, conspiracies, or playing the victim. The footage is there. Everyone saw it. We literally saw players in Argentina shirts kicking and shoving Spanish players after the final whistle. That is a fact absolutely nobody can deny. And if on top of everything you refuse to apologize, and instead claim that it is all someone else's fault, well then this punishment actually seems way too soft. It is that simple. And as for Ronaldinho, who is the driving force behind this entire saga, let me say this, I completely respect his gesture. I genuinely respect that a guy who has absolutely no obligation to Argentina, who is Brazilian and has nothing to gain here, actually went out of his way to fly to Zurich just to defend a close friend. That really says a lot about Ronaldinho as a human being, but a noble gesture is very different from the cause he is fighting for. And the cause Ronaldinho is championing here, with all the love in the world, is simply impossible to defend. You cannot just beg for mercy for a national team that actively turned the World Cup final into a chaotic boxing ring. You cannot dismiss this as just part of the game when rival players were physically beaten, while celebrating the most important championship of their entire lives. You cannot downplay a political banner in a major tournament that strictly and explicitly bans any kind of political demonstration. Ronaldinho clearly has an incredibly massive heart, just like Lionel Messi, according to his own words. But in this specific situation, his emotions have completely clouded his judgment, and his efforts, while slightly helping C, did not change the core reality. Argentina is officially out of the next World Cup. And listen to this crucial detail that European media is reporting heavily, which I find absolutely critical: the massive economic toll of this ban on Argentine football. Because we are not simply talking about the 30 million euros fine, we are talking about what it truly means to miss out on the World Cup. Think of the image rights, major corporate sponsors, broadcast television deals, jersey sales, and even the crucial revenue generated from the qualification matches. According to estimates from several highly specialized financial media outlets, Argentina missing out on the 2030 World Cup could easily cost the local AFA federation roughly 100 million euros in completely lost future revenue. That is 100 million euros added to the 30 million fine. We are talking about a tragedy that will cost Argentine football over 130 million euros. 130 million euros thrown completely down the drain just because a few sore losers refuse to accept a legitimate result, because they lack the maturity to shake hands with the opponents and say congratulations, you were simply the better team today. 130 million euros. An absolute disaster that will severely stunt the development of football in Argentina for years to come. And they can thank the players who refuse to lose with dignity. And to wrap things up, since I know so many of you are deeply split on this controversial topic, I want to throw out a few questions for you to answer down in the comments. And I ask this sincerely because I really want to know your thoughts. First question: do you believe the official FIFA punishment is fair, too harsh, or not enough? There are solid arguments for all three sides, and I want to read yours. Second, is Ronaldinho right to stand up for Messi, or should Messi, as the captain, take full responsibility without anyone having to go and beg on his behalf? Third question, would you actually do the same thing as Ronaldinho? If your best friend found themselves in a crisis like this, would you step up and defend them even if their actions were completely indefensible? And fourth, the most uncomfortable question of all: if Spain had lost that final instead of Argentina, and it was Spanish players who physically assaulted the Argentines, would you still be demanding this exact same severe punishment today? Be honest, because consistency really matters here.